So a pretty extraordinary journey through Melbourne, through being a pick 5, through the Carlton Football Club, and then only last year you were diagnosed with bipolar. And I think something that maybe might have explained a lot about your life to yourself.
It's certain my life, and I guess my time in footy made a lot more sense once I was diagnosed. I can remember back, learning about all the symptoms and all the signs, and learning a lot more about, sort of bipolar itself. I go back to when I was, 18 or 19 at times, and I just remember just going through these massive emotional roller coasters. And at the time, it's there were times where I thought, do I have something wrong with me? I knew a little bit about mental health then. I suppose that was back on a time when it was very little spoken about. And I just remember catching myself saying, no, stop being a drama queen, just get on with it. But, sort of that was, I guess, my life, just these massive emotional roller coasters that, just persisted throughout until I got diagnosed. So, yeah, looking back now, it was amazed that, I was able to sort of navigate my way through it without sort of too much harm. But,
So what was, late teens, you just felt like you had, patches where you're really down, and that's probably how I described it back in
I
early
would
20s.
go through periods, I'd go through periods where I was just really, really depressed, and just found it extremely hard to get motivated. Days when you metaphorically say you had to drag yourself out of bed. Yeah, there were days where it was just so hard to get out of bed, but I just found a way. And then I would somehow find a way when I was at the club. I had this sort of story in my head that if I went to the club depressed or showed how I was really feeling, then that was a sign that I was a weak person, letting sort of these mental health issues affect, sort of my day-to-day thing. So I would put on sort of this act, I would act like, sort of the jovial guy that I was and the joker and, train hard and that. But the downside of that was you used so much energy putting on this false front that when you got home, you were just spent. So I'd go home and I'd just lie in my room with my dog.
What got you out of bed, Brock? What were the things that got you, and the highs and lows? You must have gone through some incredible highs and lows in those periods.
There were some days I couldn't, and there's some days I would fake being physically sick, and it got to the point where, there was a really bad time in about 2011, and sort of coincided with. I'd come across from Melbourne. My first year had gone horribly wrong. I think it was 2 or 3 knee ops and then an ankle op at the end of the year. And then I was asked to lose a bit more weight than I usually do. I stripped about 5 kilos to play, but then I was asked to strip a little bit more because the coaches thought it might help with my leg speed. That wasn't working. I was having persistent troubles with my ankle. And it got to the point where I was like, I really don't think I can do this anymore. And I think I faked having, it was like gastro or something like that. And I think Bryce Gibbs had it at the time, as well. So there, it was sort of a believable story that, I could be going through the club. I'd shaved my head the week before, so my face looked a lot skinnier than it had been. So when I went into the club, it was like, oh my God, you look like you've lost a truckload of weight. But that was a really challenging time for me. It was probably the most challenging, throughout my career.
Did the clubs ever, realise that this is an issue? Or I suppose mental health then wasn't the thing it is now.
It got to a point where I was, I was self-medicating quite a lot. And I think my doctor was aware of that. He tried to talk to me a few times about it, but, I just, no, there's nothing wrong. I just enjoy a drink to, sort of help cope with the, with the pressures of AFL life. And it was just a way of, unwinding for me. But, looking back now, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I was an alcoholic. I was an alcohol abuser and I was a drug abuser as well.
You took drugs as well?
Oh, yeah, mate. I was, it was shocking. Look back now and think, how did not something more bad, happen?
Illicit drugs, not
of course. Yeah. Mate, it was mainly cocaine and ecstasy. Yep. Those are my sort of two vices.
Yeah, so cocaine and ecstasy.
Yeah, look, I look back now and you could tell the worst I got with my mental health is when it coincided with my increase abuse of alcohol and abuse of drugs. Yeah, so
that heightened it.
It was a way of self-medicating. It was a way of punishing yourself. You attach yourself to these actions because at one point in your life it actually worked. It actually helped, sort of you escape, but then it gets to a point where it doesn't work anymore. But you've become attached to these, ways of dealing with things because at one stage they worked, and you just continually do that, even though, it perpetuated the depression. It would make things a lot worse, but you can't see these things because you're so trapped in this sort of vicious cycle of, you would feel depressed, and then to try and escape those things, you would go and drink, you would use drugs, and then you'd be back right at square one. But even 100 times worse.
Pretty familiar
because
rhythm for a lot of people out there.
Alcohol is a psychoactive depressant, makes you feel worse, and the drugs would make me go on these sort of 2 or 3 4-day benders.
So you'd do that. You'd go
and then
around your footy. You would
it was never around anyone at the footy club.
But around certain times in breaks in footy.
Look, it was getting to a point where I was when I could routinely do it during the season. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. To the point where so
if we played a Friday night game, I'd potentially go out on a Friday night and finish up at sort of 3 a.m. Monday morning, and then have 4 or 5 hours sleep and go to the club and try and train or try and fit in as normally as I could. But I'd had so much practice. And so much training that I was pretty good, being able to do that.
So why did you get diagnosed, or why did you seek out help eventually? In, what was it, March last year?
Yeah, it was March last year I got diagnosed with bipolar, but I guess my sort of mental health journey started, I think, it was around February 2017. That was when I started seeing a psychologist. It was getting to a point where it was just, I really needed to start seeking out some professional help. And I started seeing a psychologist once a week. I was initially diagnosed with depression. I was talking to my psychologist about, having suicidal thoughts and, my destructive patterns of behavior in terms of, how much I was drinking, how much I was abusing drugs, doing all this type of stuff. And my partner at the time, was really encouraging me, for quite some time. And I just thought, I think now's the time to start seeking help. But even then, I wasn't fully committing myself to that. I was going to therapy. I'd started taking antidepressants, but, I wasn't ready to, I don't think I was fully ready to understand how serious of a dire situation I was in terms of my mental health.
So how did it progress to what it was?
Progressed. I got to a point where, I was putting myself under so much pressure. Like I had a lot of, I guess the basis of my troubles were I had a horrible relationship with myself. Really horrible relationship with myself. I was very black and white in my thinking. If I made a mistake or did something wrong, I was very black and white in my thinking.
Beat yourself up about
You're
it.
a horrible person, and I would treat myself absolutely appallingly. I'd shut myself off from my friends, which is a form of sort of self-harm. I would go on these, massive alcohol and drug binges, which made things even worse. So that was sort of where everything really started. And then, I was putting myself, because my self-worth was tied to what I was doing. When I was a footballer, I had a high self-worth. You can't go any sort of rungs above what you're doing. So then when footy finished, I sort of started working. I was at the bottom rung. I was a bottom feeder. Sort of in the ocean. So I attached my self-worth to that. So I was putting myself under all this pressure, to do well, to succeed. I was working full time. I was studying commerce full time. I was playing footy as well. So just like all this type of stuff, a person without any sort of mental health issues would probably struggle to juggle and to do well. And so I was putting myself under all this pressure. And then it got to a point in my life where I was like, no, I just can't do this anymore. And I tried to kill myself.
You did try to kill yourself.
Yep. So
this is after the February.
Yeah. So this was in August 2017.
Wow.
So I won't talk about method because that can stoke some ideas. But I spent it was about 2 or 3 days in ICU at St Vincent's Hospital. Spent another 2 or 3 days in sort of in just normal, just the general ward. Just while I got over sort of my post, I guess, attempted suicide ailments, and then I spent 3 weeks in the Melbourne clinic, psychiatric clinic. But even looking back now, I still didn't fully grasp how unwell I was.
Even though it was as serious as that.
Yeah,
you still didn't
I was this is just I'll just say what I have to say. and, you know, I'll just make a few changes in my life, you know, I'll start doing some mindfulness or something like that. But I really wasn't fully aware of how unwell I was, and I wasn't fully committed to getting well.
So this is the mask you've been wearing pretty much all through your life.
Exactly. And then, you know, so got out again, and made like a few changes. I got off the grog maybe for a couple of months, but, you know, once I had a drink again, you know, everything else just started, you know, the old habits started to come back. And, you know, you hear of all the time about, you know, marijuana being the gateway drug, but alcohol is the biggest gateway drug in my view. You know, it affects your decision-making processes. You know, you feel numb when you're on it. You know, you can't properly weigh out risk versus reward scenarios. So as soon as I got on the grog, that was when I guess my appetite for drugs came back. So once I started drinking and the drug use came back, and then I was in a relationship where I was really unhappy, but I couldn't bring myself to break up with her because I didn't want to break her heart. So I was putting myself second to her needs. Everything came to a head because I ended up cheating on her. I was that unhappy. And then she found out, and then bang, I was back at sort of, you know, square one again. Went on a weekend bender. She couldn't find me, so she put in a missing persons report with the police. I remember getting text messages from the police saying, "You've been reported as missing. Can you please get in touch with the police?" And then she found out, and then I just went into a deep spiral again. I had a suicide plan in place. Like I'd planned to, you know, just do what I did again. But, you know,
what stopped you that time from?
She found out. She got into my computer and saw what I was, you know, sort of planning to do, because I had a few things in place that was sort of quite obvious.
You even documented,
what you would
not
do. Sort of documented, but just, you know, what I was planning to do that week, and it all became sort of quite evident. And then she sort of, to her credit, like she still sort of cared about me, even though the way I just treated her was just horrible. You know, she said, "You've got to go back to the Melbourne clinic. You've got to go back to the Melbourne clinic." In the end, it was sort of a tug, you know, a bit of a tug of war battle, but I ended up going back to the Melbourne clinic. Spent another 5 weeks there. Came out, and this time I'd felt like I'd properly grasped the situation, and came out, and I was, you know, quite optimistic about sort of getting better, but, you know, it wasn't long before I sort of, you know, I wouldn't say relapsed again, but it wasn't long before I was back in, you know, sort of my old routine and my old habits.
So what dragged you out? What got you to the place you are today?
Well, it's, you know, I guess when you start therapy, or, you know, and being, you know, a person who didn't really possess too much patience, it was, you know, I just want to be quick fix now, you know, and you fall into this trap of, I'm on antidepressants, you know, I'll take them, and then that'll be it. I guess the society, we've sort of fallen into that trap as well. No one wants to make holistic approaches. We all just want the quick fix. Give us a tablet, I'll be fine. But I guess what sort of got me to the place now I am today is not just one thing. It's probably a myriad of things. You know, so having the diagnosis, being on the correct medication to start, that's probably the first thing. You know, and then sort of changing, you know, just working on my relationship with myself. So learning to, you know, to love myself, and learning to have compassion for myself, and learning to have empathy for myself. You know, these things, I had no trouble with other people in my life. Like when someone in my life was struggling and I was the first there, I was able to empathize with them. I was able to care for them, not judge them, you know, and actually just care for them as a person. But I could never do that to myself. And there are certain reasons for that, you know, dating back to my childhood, which probably don't want to get into now, because there are certain figures in my life that I sort of, you know, want to protect. And it's not fair on them. They don't have a right to reply. You know, there are two sides to every story. But yeah, so addressing the relationship with myself, you know, consistent therapy, you know, therapy works if you stick at it. Like I've been going every week for 3 years, and now I'm really starting to see the benefits of therapy, and I'm starting to see the changes come through. And, you know, I'm certainly in the best, you know, place mentally I've ever been in my life. And I think the last sort of piece of the puzzle was giving up alcohol altogether. So that I went on a trip to Barbados for a mate's wedding. A lot of the boys know him as my Vegas mate. So if I
Fantastic rum, beautiful Mount Gay rum. I tell you what, I was just talking to you about the Mount Gay rum factory. I had no idea you'd given up grog. I can't believe I said that.
So it was, we went over in August. There were a lot of guys who hadn't seen in 5 or 6 years. So basically came a week-long bender. So I was at the airport ready to fly home, and I was in a horrible place mentally. And it was at that point I was like, all right, let's get off the grog for a month. I'd made a lot of changes with my drinking, but it was still probably an issue when I did drink. It was, all or nothing, to the extreme. Definitely, sort of the
full binging,
the footy trip mentality type of thing.
Yeah.
That was the way I approached, a lot of things. My training, it was very all or nothing, and probably
because everyone talked about how hard a trainer you were.
Yeah, and that's probably a big reason why I had a lot of injuries in my career. I would push
yourself too hard
and push myself too hard, and but I was like, nah. Let's get off the grog for a month. Let's just, freshen up and see how you feel after that. And then the more I got off the grog, the more I enjoyed it, the better I felt. But the more I realised I actually enjoy not drinking more than I do drinking. It was a real sort of turn of events, because I'd been sort of, of the opinion that, to have fun in my life and to de-stress and to do all this type of stuff, I needed to drink. I grew up in a very sort of, heavy drinking culture, and then sort of footy really supported that sort of culture as well. When we trained hard, but then when we sort of played, we played hard. So it was very much that mindset. But the more I did it, I read a couple of books at the time. I learned the real truth about alcohol and how bad of a drug it is, and how in terms of comparison to illicit drugs and prescription drugs, it doesn't compare. Like, alcohol is the worst drug by far. Some of the statistics coming out of America, I think, like from this book I read, it was, I think 15 people die every day of cocaine-related deaths, whereas it's like 240 die of alcohol-related deaths every day. So illicit drugs and prescription drugs combined don't kill anywhere near as many people as alcohol. So I was learning about all these facts about alcohol, which sort of supported my, what I was doing at the time. I was like,
you're seeking validation.
I'm glad I'm not drinking, reading all this stuff. And then, so I haven't had a drink, since then, and I haven't looked back. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And, that was sort of the last piece in the puzzle, for me.
How much drinking did you do through your footy career? And that was there was very much a culture at that time.
Binging.
It was binging. That was part of the problem.
Yeah,
do you think?
I think so. I think it was almost like this, I guess reward or this treat for us. Oh, we've had a really hard sort of 4-week block, or we've had a really hard 8-week block. It's time to reward yourself, and probably because you were so fit, it didn't take you that much to get pissed anyway. But then because, you sort of your macho attitude, bonding with your boys and a bit of a competition who could outdo each other, you just, sort of drinking took off to new heights. And I remember that sort of the infamous boat cruise my first year at Carlton. I hadn't had a drink. Like, when I first got there, and I'd had the biggest off season I'd ever done in terms of training. I just really wanted to impress when I got to the Blues. So I was running 4 or 5 times a week, probably one or 2 weeks out from the season finishing. And it was why I had a lot of knee issues the following year. But I remember getting to that boat cruise, and I hadn't drunk in about, sort of 2 or 3 months. So I was like, I was fit, I was firing, but my attitude was, I'm really going to impress the boys here by my ability to be able to put drinks down and, and sort of to party. And I remember about an hour of that boat cruise. The rest of it was very, very hazy.
Where Levi Greenwood gets locked up by
Levi
Casbolt rather gets locked up by Chris Judd with handcuffs.
Was it? Oh,
allegedly, Chris Judd.
I don't really remember too. I remember being on the cruise,
the infamous
sculling
booze
about
cruise.
4 or 5 Coronas, and then it was pretty much lights out after that. I think one of the boys had to put me in a taxi to get home.
Yeah, I think they did a bit of that over the summer at someone's wedding. But so we talked to Gavin Kosiska, and he took marijuana every day of his footy career. But you played from 2004 to 14. Did you have positive drug strikes?
I had one. Yeah. It was.
How did that happen?
I think it was. I think I might have taken. I might have taken some ecstasy or some speed. It was just before mid-season break. I think we played on the Friday night, and then we weren't due back at the club until Tuesday maybe. And it was for country clinics or something like that. And so I'd been on a bender all weekend. I went out Friday night. And I think we finished up, sort of Monday morning, something like that. So it was a fairly decent crack. And I couldn't have told you what I took that, in terms of volume, but I took, a wide range. I think it was cocaine and ecstasy and speed. I think those were the three. And then I got drug tested on the Tuesday, but I actually thought that I was drinking so much water that day, so much water, that I think that I was pissing water in the end. So I thought, I should be fine with this. But yeah, I got a call a month later from our doc first, and then got to, had the call with the AFL doctors, and I assured them that it was just a one-off, and I was pretty good at sort of lying and sort of hiding my issues back then. So I had a bit of quite a while of sort of practicing this routine, I guess, and from then I got target tested, but I still don't know how. Somehow I managed to.
So it didn't stop you. Being a positive test didn't stop you at all.
I think there's quite a misunderstanding of, that it's not how mentally unwell people actually process information. They don't think that way. Because they're so steadfast. I was so entrenched in my actions because, as I said before, at one stage in my life, it actually worked. The drug use and the alcohol use actually worked. It sort of... sort of hid my problems, or I effectively dealt with my problems in that regard. But that only works up to a certain point. But because they worked at some stage, you attach yourself to these sort of methods or these actions of dealing with your problems. So having a drug strike over my head, that was, again, when you go out and you're drinking alcohol, all your ability, your decision-making ability is hindered. So you don't think clearly. So, if I was dead sober, then in no way I never wanted to touch drugs. But as soon as I had, alcohol that hit the lips, that was like a green light. I was like, bang, we're on here. Let's go, boys.
So some people would say that means the drug policy is flawed because you only got done once despite drinking a lot and taking a lot of drugs. But others would say, well, this is why the two strikes policy is important, because players with mental health often go to drugs, and they should get counselling, they should get awareness rather than being kicked out of the game.
Yeah, and look, it's a really delicate one, and you hear some sort of comments and saying, it's sad to see that players are hiding behind the mental health issue. Well, I can't speak for anyone else. I can only speak for myself. I had a massive mental health issue, and that's why I chose, that's why I used drugs and alcohol to try and sort of to deal with that. So I can understand, where they're coming from, and and saying we need to be harder because 3 strikes just gives people sort of freedom to move. But I think talking from my own experience, I think that's in place for a good reason. To try and help players, address their mental health issues and address why they're using drugs. And it's not just simple saying, I should be 1 strike and you're out.
So you're target tested from that time on.
Yep.
What was your thought when the drug tester would come over towards you and you think, well, I might be a chance to go here again?
Yeah, well, there was quite a few nervous times. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think, judging from my own experiences and from my own actions, that I think cocaine's in and out of your system pretty quickly. So there were a couple of times there I remember probably doing cocaine up until, maybe a Sunday afternoon, and then getting tested on a Monday morning. And I was like, oh, shit, I'm done here. I'm Gonski. And somehow, I didn't get a positive test. So all I can gather from that is that cocaine's in and out of your system pretty quickly.
Well, I think it's not anymore. I think that's the problem. That, advanced testing means that people have that done. But quite clearly in that stage, it was, it would rush through your system in less than 24 hours.
And again, it's what it's cut with as well. Like, I think we saw what happened with the Collingwood boys.
Yeah. So that exacerbates the problem, because you're worried about, you're taking drugs, you're worried about that, then you're worried about getting done for testing and all the ramifications for getting kicked out of the competition. I mean, it's just this spiral for you. It's this whirlwind.
Yeah, I wasn't I guess a very good sleeper. I've mild to severe case of sleep apnea, so I wasn't a good sleeper to start with. But then add on top of that all these sort of mental strains, about my drug use and my alcohol use. I was bulimic, you know, for 2 or 3 years while I was playing or towards the end of my career. Again, you know, I developed a story in my head that the coaches wanted me to come back at 83 kilos. I played at 85, so I naturally stripped 5 kilos to sort of play, and that was a really comfortable weight for me. But then the coaches wanted me to come back at 83 because they thought it would help, you know, with my leg speed. And so I, you know, diligently as I was, I got down to 83 and I was barely eating anything, and I was, you know, again, all or nothing. So my diet was like so regimented. I was, you know, stripping bits of fat off meat and making sure that I weighed food and I did all this type of stuff. But, you know, a month of eating like that, you know, it gets to a point you're like, shit, I need some junk food, or I need to have a bit of a binge. Again, so like the alcohol, I would go on this food binge, and, you know, I would eat, you know, shit for, you know, the best part of a day or a night, but then I would feel really guilty, and I would feel like, shit, if I put on weight, the coaches are going to see this, they're not going to play me. So that's when I started to, you know, make myself throw up.
I was going to say that with the bulimia, you make yourself throw up. Did you do that on a regular basis?
Yeah. It got to a point where I think when I was really bad, I was doing it. Like I would eat breakfast, I would eat lunch, that would be fine because I'd always be on the go. But then when I got home and I sat down at night, you had time to think about it. So I would eat my dinner, like, oh yeah, you know, I feel like something a bit naughty. So go out, get some chocolate, come back, like, oh fuck, nah. Can't do that, you're gonna put on weight, bang. So I was doing it every night.
You would do every night. You would make yourself throw up every dinner.
Yep.
For how long in your career?
It was quite consistent throughout sort of 2012 and 13. 2010 and 11 was probably when it started.
Wow.
But yeah, 2012 was probably the really bad time in terms of my eating disorder and my bulimia.
And how did you get over that? as well as all the other
look,
stuff.
I never truly got over it until I started getting therapy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How your story's just so bloody powerful. We got you on. We knew that you had some mental health issues, but it's extraordinary.
Not the extent of it. Yeah, it's incredible.
How you tell us about therapy and what it's been able to do? Because I think there's probably a lot of people who listen to this and go, you know, I've got some of those issues.
Yeah.
You know, how do I get help?
Look, I'm really lucky. You know, the AFLPA provides some amazing resources for us, and I suppose that I guess that topic of conversation has been in the headlines recently. But we're talking about the coaches, but talking about from my own experience, you can have all the resources in place that you want. If that person's not ready to get help, then those resources are useless, absolutely useless. I've had those resources at my fingertips for, you know, since I entered. You know, I had access to psychologists and all this type of stuff, and I spoke to my doctor. You know, Ben Baresi was my doctor at Carlton. You know, he's a well-known figure in sort of mental health circles. I used to run into him at the Melbourne clinic because he would do a bit of work there. So I had all these resources at my fingertips, but I wasn't ready to get help. So so the first step for me was reaching out to the PA and say, listen, I need to start speaking to someone. Because all my life, I had a real trouble with talking about my problems. You know, I bottled everything up, like everything. I wouldn't even talk to my dad or my closest friends about how I was feeling. So I started, you know, I viewed it as a sign of weakness. You know, I'm going to see someone for help. I also viewed myself as a burden to the people close to me. I was like, you know, they've got enough stuff on their, you know, on their own plate to deal with. How selfish am I by going to them and saying, listen, I need to talk to you about this, or I'm feeling bad about this, or, you know, blah, 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 whatever the case was. So the first step was going to see a psychologist. But again, as I said before, you know, just thought, you know, I was still very naive about how unwell I was, even though there were all these obvious signs. Yeah. Again, it just goes to show you that even, you know, what might seem the most obvious things to people of, you know, outside, when you're in that bubble or when you're in that vicious cycle, you don't see things clearly.
So you're a Brownlow medalist in denial.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And with the bipolar, tell us about that. A lot of people sort of think they know what bipolar is, and how far back do you think you've had this sitting with you?
Yeah, look, I can remember, you know, there'd be, you know, when I was 18 or 19, there'd be like periods of my life where I would go through 3 or 4, you know, up to a week. You know, when I was really depressed, I was screening calls. I didn't want to talk to anyone. When I got home from footy training, I would just go to my room and watch TV, or, you know, when I had my dog, you know, I'd get home from training and I'd bring my dog up to my bed and I'd close the door and I'd put the TV on. I'd just sit there and I'd just cry with my dog, you know, until I didn't have any really tears left, or I felt like I just cried as much as I could. But then the flip side of that was I'd go sort of days or even up to a week of just being sort of just really manically high, you get home and you couldn't sit still and you'd be doing things at 100 mile an hour, and I'd be calling like mates in my phone. Oh, it's so good to hear you, mate. I haven't spoken to you in ages. How about we catch up next week? And I'd make all these plans because I was in these manic states of alertness or hyperactive. And then when it actually came time to catch up with them, I can't, and I'd make up some excuse. I'm not feeling well, mate, or blah blah blah. And that's when I'd go into sort of my manic depressed days where I just want to lie in bed.
And it's amazing you talk about that. You think about the people in your life who have got those sort of things, that a million plans, high energy, and then when it comes to delivering, never do. And it makes you think there are so many people who are living with, some level of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess, every person's different, and not being able to understand their actual, their situation or what's going on. But, if you are a friend and you have, if you are someone who has a friend like then that might be a telltale sign. But again, I get back to what I was talking about before. Unless the person is actually willing to start helping themselves, what you do as a friend, all the resources that you've got in place are absolutely useless.
You have done that, and you've come out the other side of it. Are you happier now than you've perhaps ever been?
Look, I'm in the best place mentally I've ever been, and I don't wish anything had been done differently. I don't, have any regrets about anything. This has all been part of my journey. And I'm the firm believer that everything happens for a reason, and that I needed to go on, I guess, this journey to fully understand who I really was, and to learn to say, mate, it's okay. It's okay that you have a mental health issue. It's okay that you've made all these mistakes in your life. It's okay that, everything's happened the way it is. Yeah.
157 pretty good games, some great games and some poor ones. Having heard what you've talked about, it's amazing you got to that. How do you reflect on a footy career?
Look, sometimes you do fall into the trap of thinking, what if I'd sort of got myself better, or if I'd got on top of my sort of mental health issues early on. But, I guess the biggest challenge, I guess, for me was because I had such a poor relationship with myself and a poor view of myself. I spent, I reckon, my whole football career wishing I was someone else, or wishing I was someone better, or wishing, I was the best player in the league, or
This is from a pick five too. You and I pick
honestly,
five. Yeah.
I looked at myself, when I got to the end of my career, and I was like, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't play 200 games, you didn't play in a premiership, you didn't win a best and fairest. I honestly viewed myself as a failure. That was the way I looked at my football career.
Do you think a lot of footballers do that? We had Travis Cloke on recently who said that he never celebrated any of his good moments. Were you a bit the same? That you'd have a great performance?
I felt really, really uncomfortable when people gave me compliments because I didn't believe them. So I would always try and turn it around on them. If they gave me a compliment, I would, serve back a bigger compliment for them, or try and turn the attention around on them, because I just felt so uncomfortable with, if it was a compliment or, oh, you played well, mate, or you're a good player, because I didn't believe it. I honestly didn't believe it. I just thought I was just this horrible human being.
So you played finals in your first 3 years, or at least a football club does. You play this extraordinary final at the MCG that basically sees Grant Thomas kicked out of his career. We've talked to Grant Thomas and St Kilda boys about that. And then you get a new coach in Dean Bailey, and you win 3 games in 2008 and 4 wins in 2009. Yeah. One of the toughest periods of your career, and obviously of the Melbourne Football Club's tenure.
Yeah, look, it wasn't the greatest of times, and I sort of look back now and I think, well, it could have been a lot worse had if this had happened, towards the end of my career when my drinking and my drug use was really out of control, then it could have been a lot worse. But at the time, it was sort of, I guess, manageable. But that was when the cracks, I guess, for me, sort of started to appear a little bit. I think I'd got done speeding. I'd got done, sort of doing the burnout. I'd come off the, the end of season trip the year before with Nath Carroll and Jared Ruse. He got in a fight in Greece, and that's how somehow made the papers. Got locked up in Germany. There was a guy at the police station reporting his girlfriend's handbag stole. He's an Aussie guy, and realised it was us. And I think he rang maybe SEN or 3AW. I think the red carpet of the Brownlow was going on at the time, I think. And we might have got announced that we got locked up on that. So it was...
There was a bit happening, let's just say.
There was plenty happening. So that was when the cracks really started to appear. And whether it was, brought on further by sort of the football situation, probably too hard to tell. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in, figuring out whether it was that or whether it was the personal shit that was going on in my life. I guess it was an amalgamation of two.
You came from a successful junior club. I think you played in 3 premierships at Aberfeldy for a period there. And
I played a couple of Abbas, but I think I started playing TAC Cup when I was 16.
Best on ground in a grand final.
Lost the grand final by a point, won by 100. So.
But success was something that obviously was driving you along. Then you're at this footy club that is really struggling. How mentally tough was that for not just you, but for the rest of the group as well?
Yeah, look, it was. It just, I guess the speed of it all was what really caught us all by surprise. We played, won the final against St Kilda. We're up by, I think, 4 goals in the second quarter against Freo in that second final.
Away from home as well.
Away from home, and you look at the lost opportunity there, and you thought, I think we all just naturally thought, well, natural case of progression or evolution or whatever you want to call it, that we do well the following year. But round 1 didn't turn out well. I think I broke my foot, and then we had a shitload of injuries in rounds 2 and 3, and I don't think we won a game until, so that just, I think it just all caught us by surprise. And then no one could have sort of envisioned what would happen to the Melbourne Footy Club from there. Dana's got the sack, and then Dean Bailey took over, and that didn't really work out well. And so it was just a really, really, I guess, time of uncertainty. And I guess, as I said before, the biggest thing was just how quickly it all sort of took place and caught us off guard.
So we're going to go forward before we go back. Yeah. So 2012, on the couch, and you're asked, was winning a priority? And you say, definitely not. And I think you'd have to be blind Freddie to not figure it out. Brock McLean, you started the tanking inquiry, and basically unwittingly. Is that right?
Look, part of, being, I guess one thing I really struggled to contain back then was my emotion. My emotions were all over the place, and I was at the point I felt something speak it, or, I had really... Yeah, look, I wasn't wrong. In fact, I didn't regret the things that I said, but I probably maybe would have worded them a bit different if I had my time over. But yeah, look, one thing was said, and then, I think it really dawned on me, I didn't really think that much at the time. It's like, that's what I thought, so I just said it.
And so just to put context around it as well, because we've got to do this for the people who don't know the issues, it would go on 3 years. Everyone had known there was some tanking. Yeah. There was absolutely no idea from you that it would spark an inquiry. Adrian Anderson all of a sudden picks up on it, and we're away.
And to be honest, I wasn't expecting the question. I just thought, the question's going to be about, I'd been in the football wilderness for 2 years.
You're at Carlton Football Club.
Come back and play myself into some really good form. So I just thought that was just going to be what we spoke about. So I guess if I had prepared for that question coming, I guess I probably could have, scripted a bit better or answered a bit differently, because I was so surprised by it. Yeah. I just spoke just spoke the truth, because that's what came to my mind.
And was it right you were a last minute call up for the show? Was someone else meant to do it?
Yeah. I got the last minute call up. No, it was just like, I might have found out that afternoon. I was like, all right, I'll go on. And, I just honestly thought they were just going to talk about, being out of the football wilderness for a couple of years.
And in the middle of saying that, do you realise there's an issue here, or are you still blissfully
unaware? Honest? And then I think I turned my phone on afterwards, and it started going bananas. And I sat back and I thought, oh, shit. Yeah. I think I've just opened up a big can of worms.
Did you get a phone call from whoever it was, from the PR person at Carlton?
No. I think it was the next day. It all sort of, I sat down and spoke with Macca, and we had a bit more time to sort of, go over what was actually said and the repercussions of it all. And I think around that time, Sticks Kernahan might have pulled me into his office and gave me a real big sort of talking
What
to
the hell are you
him.
doing here, mate?
Yeah, because
Can't be honest.
There was a few other things like there was that. I think I was asked.
There was a tweet. Yeah, there was a tweet.
Yeah, there was that. There was a tweet at the time. I think at one stage, someone asked me when I was doing a media conference, about Juddy and about the captaincy the following year, and I said, look, if it was me, I'd probably just focus on my career and maybe leave the captaincy to someone. The headline was, Brock tells Juddy to give up captaincy. I was like, no, I never said that. Taken out of context, but so there were a few things that were sort of bubbling at the time. And Sticks called me into his office one day, and look, it was water off the duck's back. I grew up in a very, 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 very old school family, so we were hit between the eyes. I reckon a good once a day back when I was a kid. So he hit me up between the eyes, and I just copped it on the chin and got on with it.
So let's rewind to 2009. Round 18, I was at the MCG working for the Herald Sun, and I see Paul Johnson at fullback. I see Frawley and Matty Warnock playing forward. I see Brock McLean playing in the forward pocket. And I thought something is wrong with football. And what happened was Dean Bailey, and they'd basically been told that he had to lose games of football or near enough.
Yeah.
And eventually he was suspended, not for tanking, but for not putting in a best effort. What was that game like, and what was that season like when you must have known something was very wrong?
Very, very, very weird. Very weird. I reckon the weirdest I've ever felt, and probably the time that I knew, apart from all the obvious things, but the time that I felt it the most personally was we were playing Carlton. It was round 21, maybe? Yeah, round 22. It was that sort of that. And we were playing Carlton, and I was playing out of the full forward square. Yeah. One out of the square. And I was sort of looking around and going, this is just really, really weird.
This is the Cruiser Cup.
Is that right? Okay. Cruiser Cup was 07.
That's right.
That was a different time. But then there was 2008 where... Mm. No,
2009 was the year.
Sorry, 2009.
2009, was the actual...
Yeah, and I think Frawley was giving Favola an absolute bath early on, and then someone else got put onto him, and Fev ended up kicking 7 maybe in the second half. And anytime I was just like, I was so bored playing one out of the square at full forward that I was like, nah. So I'd run up on the ball, I'd get maybe a couple of quick possessions, runner would come out, no mate, they want you to work on your one-on-one game out of the square, get back down there.
Did you feel like telling him to get stuffed? I'm not doing this.
At one stage I had a few sort of stern words for the runner, but that was sort of when I felt, wow, this is really, really, really obvious. And it wasn't, and like, this is probably one thing that I wish I had have expressed on the couch, but no players went out deliberately trying to lose a game. That just goes against, a player's, sort of natural, I guess, instinct to go out there. But I guess it was just, we didn't put ourselves in the best position to win a game.
And that that round 18 game too was where, you did everything you could to lose that game, and Jordan McMahon kicks the goal late for the Tigers. Remarkably, you still get a priority pick. You get Scully and Trengove. They get Dusty Martin, so they nail that. Yeah. After your investigation, there's the revelation about the vault where people were discussing it. How did it unfold as a player? Like, everyone knew what the game was, but were the protests from senior players saying, "Man, this is bullshit"?
Yeah, look, I remember being in the club. I think it was on that Monday or the Tuesday, and there were a few other players who were like, "Nah, this is absolute shit. We won't be a part of this." Blah blah blah. These were younger players, not mind the older players. And I think a few of us, I think it was maybe the leadership group at the time, we were sort of brought into Dean Bailey's office. And you could tell that he, was doing things against sort of his will and against his, I guess, want or desire to win games of footy. But, we were just told in pretty stern words, we're all got to be on the same page here.
And obviously, Cameron Schwab, who was the CEO, and Jimmy Steins, who were the president, the feeling was the imprimatur came from them. And it must be said, this is something that had happened for many years, and other clubs have got picks for it. Yeah. And Melbourne probably did it in a more blatant fashion, and that's why in the end, Bailey got 16 matches suspended for that. Chris Connolly acting in a manner prejudicial to the draft. We sort of laugh about how brazen it was, but it was a horrific time for the AFL.
Yeah, it wasn't a good time at all. It wasn't a good time for sort of anyone involved. Players, coaches who were coaching, against their will. I guess, for the.
You feel sympathy for Bales almost because he's a second-year coach?
100%. Yeah, I think he's the sort of the you don't want to say people are victim, but he was a
scapegoat,
a scapegoat, or a sort of a victim in all of this. He was an unwilling participant.
So when you complain, he says, "This is the plan." Yeah. Okay. We just continue the plan.
Yeah. We just all right. We've just got to try and toe the line as best as possible. And I guess there's a big lesson to any clubs out there or anyone thinking tanking doesn't work. Yeah. Like, look what happened to Jack Trengove, unfortunately not to his own fault, had a lot of injuries, and Tom Scully left 2 years later.
Yeah.
And the club never played finals until 10 years later.
In a lot of ways, they're still recovering from it. They've had a really good finals appearance since then, but they're still that losing mentality.
We actually hit some form towards the end of that year, like the young group. We were beating St Kilda, probably the best side in it that year. And we were beating them at halftime in the last round of the season, but actually beating them, what that would have done for the confidence of a young playing group. So, righto, boys, we've got some real momentum going into next year. But halftime, the changes came out, and we lost.
Something's always going to happen at halftime, wasn't it?
So if people say to you, because the club was never officially found guilty of tanking, if someone said, "Did Melbourne tank that year?"
Oh, look, I think, again, I'll rehash and I'll say, I think you'd have to be blind Freddie not to see that they weren't. Yeah.
Who do you blame for it?
Oh, look, because I wasn't privy to a lot of those, conversations.
And Jimmy's passed away now.
Yeah, Jimmy's passed. Dean's passed away, which is, when that came out sort of last year, that was really sad, and I felt sorry for Karen and Mitch and I forget his other son's name, but I felt really sorry for them because one, they had to hear their sort of dead husbands and fathers name pop up again, but he wasn't there to defend himself. But I think from talking to Bales and sort of seeing what was going on, and I think sort of Chris Connolly may have been the mastermind behind it all, may have been. And again, I'm only sort of going on from what I saw and from what I heard, but I was never privy to any of those conversations, so I can't equivocally say,
And not to labour the point, we'll move on, but I think of what the AFL condoned for a long time, and then they said, okay, this is fantastic, Melbourne has to do this. Do you feel any anger towards Andrew Demetrio, who just for so long said tanking doesn't exist, there is no such thing as tanking, and then eventually Melbourne gets caught with their hand in the cookie jar?
Look, I don't think there's no anger towards anyone. You got to look at what his job is, and that was basically to protect the brand of AFL and promote it and help it evolve. So that would have set the AFL back quite a few years, or and quite a bit of bad backlash if he sort of admitted that.
Yeah, no doubt. It's all about brand protection. So the end of 2009, you asked for a trade, and you say to Dean Bailey, I need part of that is about the losing culture.
Look, it was the biggest part for me was, and I probably didn't emphasise this enough at the time, was I felt I needed a change. And sort of coming off what happened towards the back half of the year, that those emotions were sort of still fresh, so that was bandied around quite a bit in my conversation with Bales and Tim Harrington and Chris Connolly. But the main reason for me leaving was I felt I needed a change. I felt that was going to be the best thing for me. And I just felt if I had to continue at Melbourne, they weren't going to get the best out of me, so it was a waste of time for them, and it's going to be a waste of time for myself. So that was the true reason why I asked for a trade. Everything else was sort of spoken about, and that became, I guess, probably the spoken about reason why I wanted to leave.
And obviously to Carlton, where you've got a massive family connection, 3 family members who played there as well. Why was it Carlton? Did you almost go somewhere else? They were
the ones that showing a lot of interest. Yeah, I guess. And I'd had a bit of time with Brett at Carlton, at Melbourne. Sorry, he coached me in my first year, so I knew Brett well, and they painted a really clear picture of where I fit into the midfield. They had all these guns, like sort of Juddy and Murph was up and coming and Gibbo and these type of players. So I came in sort of, that inside grunt, sort of midfield. I thought, this is going to be perfect. I'll be able to do my thing and I can give it out to these blokes and, just let them do all the flashy stuff. So that was sort of the picture that Brett and the footy club, sort of painted for me. And I just thought, bang, this is going to be a really good sort of, fresh start for me. But yeah, it was, it wasn't exactly the most, smooth sailing for the first 2 years.
10 games in your first 2 years, 6 games in 2010 and then 4 in 2011. And then your last 3 years, 15 games, 22 and 16. So you peeled off, 50 odd good games there.
Yeah, well, coming into the end of, sort of 2011, it was like, I honestly thought this is my last year. Yeah, this is my last year. So I guess that was when, sort of those, I guess that's when, and I guess this is what reinforced sort of my behaviours was, or what reinforced me to keep doing them was my form in 2012 was great when I was playing. And that's when I was hitting the piss, probably every weekend and getting on the gear every weekend. So I thought, hey, this is a recipe. This works for me.
They probably had some Friday night games as well.
Just going to keep doing it, So that sort of reinforced my value. I was like, wow, it's working for me. Don't stop. Keep going. Because my form was actually really good. Yeah, but I think it was just a coincidence. And, being in a midfield where I was probably the 4th or 5th best midfielder every week allowed me to go unnoticed. Juddy was getting tagged heavily, or it'd be Murph, or it'd be Gibber. So I could just play without sort of worrying about any pressure on myself. So I just thought, this is my last year. Let's just go and have some fun. And sort of that was my mindset.
So you play 16 games in 2014, and at that stage, it ended pretty quick.
Yeah.
Your exit meetings are positive.
Yeah.
You go overseas, still believing that you're going to get a contract for the next year.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I was told that I was a required player and, that everything would be sorted out, once I got back from overseas. They knew I was going on a trip. They said, go and enjoy it and, come back, everything would be sorted. But I think Adam Ramanaskas, who was my manager at the time, got in touch with me when I was overseas and, sort of said, yeah, I'm starting to get a bit worried, mate. The offer hasn't come. And then I think I had a call with Andy McKay. I was in
Boss, yep.
Yeah, and I was in Copenhagen at the time.
Sober or
no. I was travelling by myself. We were at a strip club in Copenhagen. Me and some guys from the hostel I was staying at. So with a group of guys, and the conversation that I had with Macca was, it was pretty forthright. I think I ended up telling him to go F himself, at the end of the conversation, and hanging up. I'd had a skinful by then,
and was he telling you it looks bad, or was he saying it's
bad?
over?
Yeah, looks bad. Unless something drastically changes, you'll be done.
You shaking your head?
Look, I wasn't.
Like you've had 30 disposals in that last game, and you get 2 Brownlow votes, and you're told you're going to play on.
Yeah.
Any wonder you're angry on the phone.
Yeah, look, I was angry, but I think, at the time I'd had a skinful, and, not being able to process emotions really well, or not process, bad news really well. Whenever there was a bad emotion or something bad happening in my life, my answer was to run away from it and to hide behind the bottle and hide behind drugs. And I remember feeling really sad at the time. Like I was devastated, and not having anyone there that I knew, or not having anyone that I trusted. If I had someone that maybe I would have opened up to them, or maybe I would have spoken to them about it. But because no one was there, I was like, righto, let's launch. And I just went on a bender to end all of benders. And then, I was in London with Aussie when I got the call sort of confirming it. And that was it. It was like, your time's done, mate. We're going to delist you. And,
What do you think you're going to do for the rest of your life? And footy, you're only 28 years of age, I think, at the time, weren't you?
I had no idea. My answer was, I guess I was like, no, I'm going to take I'm not going to work for a year. I'm not going to have anything, sort of that makes me be, regimented, or that has routine, or that confines me to a certain type of life. So I was like, nah, I'm just going to enjoy my life for the next sort of 12 months, and then get a job and worry about that later on. So, and it was just probably the worst thing I could have done for myself.
So you were upset there. I think you gave the Herald Sun an interview and you talked about how Mick Malthouse hadn't called you.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been ideal, wouldn't it?
Yeah, look, there's again, there was a headline put out. There was like, no, I don't actually feel like that. I'm not angry with anyone. I just said I was disappointed how it all ended. Just a simple phone call would have made the world of difference. But I didn't hate Mick. I didn't hate the club.
Yeah.
I still don't. I still don't hate Mick. I don't hate anyone.
Have you seen him since?
I haven't. And if I saw him, I'd probably, give him a fist bump. I'm not allowed to shake hands. COVID-19.
He did say fist pump, didn't he? I'm sure he did.
Social distancing, all that type of stuff. But, it was just, I I guess, it was just a really unexpected time.
How aware were they of all of your issues? Because
they're probably well aware of them. I mean, I don't know.
Stage,
I reckon, that might have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was never told that. So I can only go off the information was, they got Mark Wiley in, they got a few others, and they just said, but listen, mate, there's not
Christian
enough.
Jacks, Mark Wiley, and Liam Jones. The only one that really lasted was Liam Jones.
Yeah, so it was just, right, and that was it.
Mick Maldas has been here in the podcast chair, and he's talked about like fat contracts. How they had to absorb some of those. Was it a money issue for you?
I don't look. I would have played for. I think the 2 years prior, 13 and 14, I was on base and match.
Oh right,
payments,
okay. So that wasn't the
money
issue.
wasn't an issue, and I would have just loved to have kept playing. But the silver lining in me getting this, it made me like if I'd have played on for another, say 2 or 3 years, I'd be where I was 3 years ago in terms of my mental health journey. So I look at it as a blessing in disguise, even though those 2 or 3 years post footy were so tumultuous and they were they took years off my life, I think, and I'm still amazed at how I'm sort of being able to sort of remain intact to this day after those years, because I was living at the time I was living a block back from Chapel Street, in Windsor. So absolute trouble.
Didn't have to go to Copenhagen for strip joints,
being real regimented and, having, not allowed to drink during the week to all this newfound freedom. And I, took to it like a duck to water.
In a strange way, though, have you now sitting back and you've fallen back in love with yourself and worked that out about, do you look back at your footy career and I know you're saying a few negative things, but say, geez, I did well?
Yeah, look, I'm able to look back now and say, played 100, close to 160 games and, worked through some of the injuries that I did. And, something that I look back on quite fondly was, the game nearly went like up until sort of 06, 07, the game suited me perfectly. Low rotations. It was a real endurance game. It was just a one-on-one game, just grind it out. And that suited me perfectly. Never had leg speed, but I was blessed with endurance. So, and then, I think Mick Malthouse is the one that introduced, the rotation system. He spoke about, going to the NHL and seeing how the players rotated. And that really ruined me. The game sort of went past me by then. It became all about, short bursts of, sort of speed and intensity and energy, which didn't suit me at all. And then I had my injury. So I was really proud of the fact that I was able to, sort of change my game to the point where I was able to get back into the side and play well. So I can look back on those, my ability to be able to do that quite fondly. I think, good on you, mate.
You should have been really good in 2009 because Bailey was only having 60 rotations at the stage.
Yeah. But, coming off the ankle injury then, I still wasn't 100% fit. I think I really underestimated how bad that, that sort of ankle was. But, at least now I can look back and, be proud of myself and say, you know what, mate, not many people can say that.
Will you be connected to these two clubs that you played for in the future, do you think? Where are you at with footy now?
Look, Melbourne, we have like a past players sort of running group. So there's a big group of us in a WhatsApp group chat. We meet, if you feel like going for one, we meet at the Tan, 6:30 on a Saturday morning, do a couple of laps and then have brekkie afterwards. That's all, up in the air at the moment now because of the sort of the COVID thing going on. But, I was part of that group for a little bit and then I got really unwell again. So I had to step back from that. So I've only sort of recently joined up, probably over the last 12 months, back into that fold and it's great. It's like sort of almost like being back at the footy club again.
What's your best estimation of what happened in that 186-point loss? You were gone by that stage, but, for those that weren't aware, a lot of player meetings that week, they were trying to save Dean Bailey's job. He was going to get an extension. They were talking about whether Cameron Schwab might get sacked. They go down to Geelong. David Schwartz comes back from the rooms as an SEN commentator and says, I got a great feeling about this. You lose by 186 points. Yeah. What do the boys say about what happened that week?
Yeah, I've never asked anyone about it. I've never spoken. I've heard, some rumours going around, which I don't want to sort of engage in rumours, but that if those rumours are true, like I'd find it pretty damning that actually happened. But it was. You never want to see any club go through that. It's not a good look for the game, regardless of who it is. But to have that happen then to get sacked, it was just obviously a really, really bad time for the club.
Yeah. The burnout story. So this is in Jeff McClure's column. Like now it's probably front page news. Chook's Sam McClure's dad has passed away. So you'd been doing burnouts. You're at a Trinity College.
Yeah.
And eventually the groundskeeper says, no, you have to park your hotted up Holden or whatever out the front and walk into training at Trinity Grammar.
So I just got a new ute. It was a Maloo, and I'd always wanted a Maloo ute. So, it's a HSV. So it's a really really hotted up ute.
Honda Civic,
400 kilowatts, all this type of stuff. Blah blah blah. Back when I was a young idiot, I'm just an older idiot now. But so I was just about to drive out of training, and Mark Jamer was sitting there. He had a Monaro, so he's a bit of a rev head as well. So he started doing the sign, I was do a burnout. So I was like, I was 21, feeling the adrenaline running through me. I was like, I'm going to do a burnout. I did this, mate. It went for about 40 metres, and I was sort of, fishtailing out of the thing as I went out, and all the boys were going bananas.
It, but well done. Yeah.
And then I was driving back to on the Eastern, going back to Junction Oval to do weights that afternoon, and then the phone rings. It was Ross Monaghan, who was our footy manager at the time. He was like, "Yeah, mate, I think you better get back here. The groundskeeper's not too happy with you." So I was like, "Shit." So I drove back, and he was like absolutely filthy, and rightly so. I think
it said that you apologised and he didn't accept your apology.
No, he didn't. I was like, "Mate, what do you want me to do? I'll come back and I'll scrape it off. I'll repaint the asphalt if you want." He's like, "Nah, you can get stuffed." And like he was throwing the club. He's like, "Nah, none of you respect. You wear your boots when we tell you to wear grass cuts and all this stuff."
That's right. That was reported too. Yeah.
And he's like, "Nah, you're not parking here anymore." So I had to park at the front gates of Trinity, and then it was about a K walk. Like it was a long sort of driveway into the grounds. And I think on one occasion, Bales might have given me a lift in, but I'd put the thumb out as a bit of a joke. Walking past, blokes would walk past with their finger up. But yeah, it was again, not having thought through, sort of risk versus reward. Of my actions before I did it. Yeah, it was just, one of those, growing up, I was a knockabout kid growing up. So all those things were just okay to me. That was just, part and parcel of day-to-day life.
And at your peak, you were probably the most interesting Twitter man going around there for a period. How much it cost you a bit financially, but
look, I think that was just Twitter was purely out of boredom for me, and I guess an avenue, to not focus on myself or not focus on my issues or not focus about, what was going on in my own head. So it was just, it was a platform or a source sometimes to vent frustrations or to vent emotions or just,
which we've all
just
done.
To escape my own head.
And the tweet that got you in trouble was you said, "Today can fuck right off."
Yeah.
So then someone said, "Did you finally get delisted?" And you said, "No, your mum has given me something, that we won't talk about." So it was, you got rolled for that. But I mean, you looked at now, it's a cry from help, the initial tweet, and then you respond badly to it.
Yeah. Look, it was, it just, it just brings up, I was just really unwell at the time. And, these were just all sort of, I guess, you can call them warning signs, you call them whatever you want. But yeah, it's just clear now looking back and knowing everything and knowing all the warning signs that it was just, it was just a sign that I was just unwell and I needed help. I needed a lot of help.
You were still you're brave as a footballer, and it sort of seems passé now, but you came out, your younger sister Ellie's gay, you came out and did a story with Jill Stark talking about, advocating that kind of stuff. Now, so many of our girls are openly gay, and it's fantastic that we can celebrate it. But it was brave at the time.
Yeah, look, I've never been shy in coming forward and speaking my mind and speaking and standing up for things that I truly believe in. And I truly believe in sort of the marriage equality movement, the anti-homophobia movement, especially at the time. My sister was gay. I had a lot of friends that was gay, but even if they weren't gay, everyone deserves the right to be treated equally, regardless of sex, regardless of gender, all these types of things. But back then, when it came to sort of looking at myself, and I knew I needed help, and I knew that I was unwell. It was like I used to use perspective. There are worse people off out there than you are. Perspective's good when you're talking about mundane things or material things. Like, I don't have a nice house, I don't have a nice car. Or hang on, there are 3 billion people living below the poverty line. Like, at least you've got a roof over your head and you've got a car. That's when perspective is right. But when you talk about something as well, as bad as, sort of, bipolar, or you're talking about drug abuse or alcohol abuse, then you have every right to sort of think, oh, hang on, there is something wrong with me. But I dealt with that by putting all my energy and focus towards other things, or things that I believed in, or things that I wanted to stand up about, because it took the focus off me for a while, made me forget about my problems. And that's not to say that as I said, I didn't believe in what I was doing. I firmly believed in what I was saying, but it was also a way for me to not focus on myself and not focus on my issues.
You donated 10 grand to the debt demolition at Melbourne, and the kind of thing where we all thought, what a star, but you probably at that stage, that's a cry for help again. That's throwing cash at something. So
it was a cheap way, not cheap in dollar terms, but it was an easy way to take the focus off myself and feel good about myself. Yeah.
How appreciative was your sister, and how do you look at it now when Dean Laidley's situation came out? I mean, my phone, like yours, must have just went into meltdown when that photo came out, because people said, oh, it's different. Yeah. And, we'd love a gay person to come out as a male footballer if they felt it was right, but we still look at that now and we go, well, maybe you can see what the reaction might be.
Yeah, it's the whole sort of Dean Laidley situation. I had a couple of years with him as an assistant coach, and the thing that I loved about him, I knew he was different. And that's what I loved about him. And I think that's where football still has a bit of a way to go to celebrate the individuals and celebrate creativity. And it was really interesting when I was speaking to Mav Weller. I ran into him just not long after he finished up at Richmond at the dog park. And he said, one thing that Richmond do really well is they celebrate individuals, they celebrate, people that are themselves, and they really try and foster that in each, just be yourself and don't have to worry about falling into, the ins and outs of being a footballer, or, not, worried about being chastised for being different. And I still think that's where we've got a bit of a way to go in football, celebrating individuality and really embracing the fact that people are different. And, a footballer doesn't just look like, your typical 6'3", broad shoulders, short back and sides haircut, and, the same dress.
And that's the thing as well, that, they do it at the good football clubs, and maybe it's just going to take someone who's really brave, and maybe that first person will be the trailblazer, because I tell you what, we've all got gay friends and we all realise it's just part of life now, but football seems so bloody backwards about it all.
Yeah, it does at times, and I think, look, I don't know if I'm speaking hopefully, but I honestly think that if someone did come out who was gay, I really think that they would think, wow, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are seeing a lot more people speak openly about it, and say we would support anyone who came out as gay. But I guess until someone actually does it, or we have someone, it's all the real unknown. And I can understand why their hesitation maybe, to not want to come out. They might just want, I just want to avoid the spotlight. And that's the thing. They just want to be treated as normal people, not discriminated against. But if you're the first of someone to come out,
it's always the hardest.
The pressure and the spotlight that's going to come on you from that. So I can understand it from that perspective.
But hopefully then the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth come out. And that's because in an AFL sense, and we know that, the amount of social change we've seen and driven by the AFL. So that's it, isn't it?
Couple of quick ones. Chris Judd at his very best. Did you play alongside him and think, bloody hell?
Played best. I was actually talking about this with someone the other day. Best player I played with and against. I played on him. It was 2008, and the week before they said, mate, you're going to play on Juddy next week. You're just going to go head to head with him. I think he had 30, I had 32. So I did all right, but, mate, he was at 60% rat power. He'd just come off 2 groins. And, mate, I think that was the game where he took this absolute screamer of an overhead mark, and, that was all the rows. Judd shows that he can play forward and take big overhead pack marks.
You've been on the trampoline.
And I played it in that day. I was like, shit, if I'd have played it in full rat power. I think the time where I really saw how good he was up close was 06. We played over there. We were in some really good form. I think we'd won a few in a row. We came up against them. I think we held our own. We got done by a couple of goals, and I managed to play pretty well. But I remember getting a really up close look at him and thought, yeah, this guy is very, very special.
Yeah, Melbourne lost a lot of people in that time with Jim Steins and Dean Bailey and the like, terrible. But Troy Broadbridge as a young kid, end of your first year, you lose a teammate. How difficult was that?
It was just really, really surreal. Really surreal. we went to his Bucks party. We did barefoot bowls at the St Kilda Bowls Club on Fitzroy Street there, and he was such a lovely guy. And it was just in a time in his life where everything had just seemed to come together perfectly for him. He was in good form. He was playing well, met the love of his life, and the whole situation was just really sad and still sort of hard to fathom, really, that whole sort of thing. Like, we went over there the end of 2005. We built a school. We went to PP. We saw where his body was found, and it was still really hard to imagine, like, water being up, to a certain level, and just how powerful it is. Like, unless you actually experience something like that firsthand, I don't think you can get a full appreciation of how powerful water it is. Like, I think my natural default thought was, oh no, you just rise to the top when water goes up. No, it doesn't work like that, obviously.
Colin Sylvia. Yeah, he passed away in a motor accident. Yeah. I think we feel like he lived life to the fullest. But yeah, it's a horrible loss of life.
I knew Cole really well. We were very close when we were at Melbourne. Obviously, when you go to a different club, you sort of, you go in your separate ways, and you might not be as close. But we still spoke quite regularly. And Cole was just a very misunderstood person. Like, he, deep down, he was an extremely loyal person, and would bend over backwards and would go into battle for someone who he considered a very good friend. And obviously had his issues. Post football, and obviously very public at the time. And I had a shitload of issues post football, but none of them were public. So at least I was able to sort of deal with them in a private nature. But from all reports, he was just getting himself back into a good routine. He's getting his life back on track. New girl, back living at home, back with his mates. Simple life. He just sort of, wrapped for him, and then that happened. And, in the manner that it happened, it was really heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for him, for his family, for his dad and his mum, who'd worked so hard to sort of get him back on the straight and narrow, and his sister as well. And
he was a pick 3 and you were pick 5.
Pick 5. Yeah. Had some real fun times with Cole.
There's a book in that one.
Could save those for another day. But yeah, just a really sad. And I was really upset at the time, but I wasn't in a position where I could go and grieve for him, because I was still doing a lot of work on myself, because I still wasn't in a very, very good headspace at that time. That was end of 2018. So I was still going through sort of my own shit, my own battles, and I never got the chance to go up to the funeral. But it's something that I'm really keen to do, is to go back up to Mildura and Woodburn and see Craig and see Lynette and see Casey and and go and see the site where he died and really pay my respects to him in that way, because I would have loved to do it at the time, but yeah, I was just, a funeral then would have just sent me right off the rails.
What do you miss most about playing AFL footy, and what do you think, Christ, thank God I don't have to do that anymore?
Yeah, look, obviously the performing, and running out in the G. Like, I really struggled with going to the footy and watching the footy first out. Like, I was still really heartbroken that I wasn't playing footy. And again, it got back to my issues in self-worth. I thought I was worthless because I wasn't playing footy. So there were a lot of times where I'd watch footy and I'd be crying, or I'd be manically depressed afterwards, which would probably fuel a drug bender or an alcohol bender or both. But playing and being around the boys every day is probably one thing that I miss the most, and one thing that I do not miss at all, or where footy is at today. I just think it's way too overanalyzed, and players just have no lives anymore. And being off social media for 4 or 5 years, which was the best thing I ever did. I don't miss it. It's one thing that I don't really, if I had my time, I don't regret much. But if you had your time again, I wouldn't be on social media. And it's just one thing that I don't miss about footy at all. It's just the attention that I get. And I guess that's the byproduct of, right, you want more money? You're going to need to be at access at all times. We're slowly heading down the American sports path that way. They have access to players at all times.
33 years of age?
34.
34. So you got 50 years left.
Yeah.
How excited are you, despite all the fun you had and all the issues it created, with what you've got left in your life? Because as you say, you set yourself up to be free of mind.
Yeah, look, I'm, where I'm at the moment is, I'm not looking for, I'm not thinking about the next 50 years. A lot of my mindfulness practice and a lot of my meditation is revolved around just trying to be in the moment as best as you possibly can, because, as human beings, we're wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So if you do that all your life, you constantly, I did that, constantly avoided painful emotions and painful experiences. That what led me to go and drink and to abuse drugs and to try and escape my problems in that regard. But you quickly learn that everything in life is impermanent. So those bad emotions, you just sit with them, you work with them, they'll eventually dissipate. The good moments, stop trying to, sort of to cling to them, because they'll eventually dissipate all those good feelings. Just trying to learn to be in the moment and not get caught up in the rat race of, of life, and just learning to enjoy the small things, I guess.
Brock McLean, thanks for your time.
Cheers. Thanks,
Brock.
boys. Thanks
Good
for
on
having
you,
me.
mate. That was
Too
great.
easy.